Hello, friends. Welcome back to this week's episode of Film Analysis Podcast, the weekly series where I analyze cool films for my film class. Pretty neat. So this week we're doing Rear Window. It's a 1954 mystery thriller directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Again, another Hitchcock film. It's very fun and fresh. Let's jump right into it. So, this movie follows a story of a guy named L.B. Jeffries. He's referred to as Jeff, who is in a wheelchair because he broke his leg. And he has a girlfriend. Her name is Lisa, and he also has a caretaker from the insurance company named Stella, and these guys are very important. So because he's in a cast, he can't go anywhere, so he watches people outside of his rear window. And since there was a huge heat wave, people have their windows open to, keep cool. So he watches a bunch of people. He watches like a dancer who he nicknames Miss Torso. He looks at a woman who he calls Miss Lonely Hearts because she's single. He looks at a composer. He looks at a family with a husband and wife with a dog, a husband and wife who are newlyweds, and then the main couple that they are watching, which are the Thorwalds. So he's talking to Stella, the insurance lady, about how he doesn't know whether or not he should marry Lisa because they have really different lifestyles, yada yada. He kind of is staring out the rearview window for a while, just staring at stuff. And one night he hears a scream coming from the Thorwald's apartment, and then later Mr. Thorwald leaves carrying a suitcase a bunch of times in the night. And then after in the morning she's gone. And he sees Thorwald cleaning a knife and a handsaw, and gets people to take a large trunk away somewhere. So he thinks in his mind he thinks he's committed a murder, right? He thinks Mr. Thorwald killed Mrs. Thorwald, but he doesn't have a lot of evidence to prove it other than that he was just snooping. So he lets Lisa and Stella know, and they both kind of don't believe him for a minute, but then they start watching Mr. Thorwald and they see how suspicious he is, and they believe him as well. Jeff calls up Tom Doyle, his friend detective, who investigates and doesn't find anything, and doesn't believe that Miss Thorwald died. He thinks that she went on a train and left, and she sent back a postcard, and that all made sense. So they kind of dropped it for a second and were not worried. But then the neighbor's dog, the couple with the dog dies. And throughout this film, the dog had been picking and sniffing at the flower bed under the Thorwald's house. So it was really suspicious that the dog was dead and its neck was broken. And so Thorwald was the only person who didn't come to the window when the lady found out her dog died. And so he, takes note of that. He's really suspicious. Lisa's really suspicious. Stella's really suspicious. So they try and get him out of his apartment using a note. And what ends up happening is he leaves, and Stella and Lisa go out to try and find what's in the flower bed, right? While Mr. Thorwald is gone, while they distracted him. And when that happens, they don't find anything under the flower bed, so Lisa goes up and breaks into Mr. Thorwald's apartment to look at all the stuff, because previously there had been some jewelry and some other weird stuff going on in the house that they were watching, and they wanted to find evidence. So Lisa, just takes it upon herself to go into the house and find out for herself. So she does. She finds almost nothing at first, and then Mr. Thorwald gets home, and he threatens her, and Jeff calls the police, and they arrive, but before they take her away, Lisa shows that she found the wedding ring of Mrs. Thorwald, which would prove that she didn't leave, because a woman never leaves her wedding ring behind. So they arrest Lisa, but the thing is that Mr. Thorwald notices that Lisa was like showing the window this ring, and he realizes that Jeff has been watching him the whole time. So Lisa gets arrested. Jeff tells Stella to go get Lisa out of jail, and then when he picks up the phone again, he thinks he's talking to someone he knows, so he blurts out something about how Mr. Thorwald is getting away, but he realizes that actually it was Mr. Thorwald calling him to confront him. So Mr. Thorwald goes up to Jeff's apartment. He threatens him. He like hangs him over the banister, and the police get there just in time. Everybody gets there just in time to catch him and to catch Mr. Thorwald, and they solve the mystery. It's pretty neat. The movie ends with Jeff in a wheelchair with 2 broken legs this time, and Lisa like in some jeans, which she was never in. She was always like very, social and had had a bunch of fashionable clothes. So her being in jeans kind of meant that she was chilling out a little bit, and they kind of lived their happy ever after. We assume. I thought the plot of this film had a lot of really good points. I liked it. It was engaging. I enjoyed it. Like, I thought the story was well done. Along the lines of themes and stuff, I think that a lot of the themes were about, well, the first one, the obvious one, is talking about any movie in this time period was probably alluding to communism in some way, and the way that I see that this one is that a lot of people were very suspicious of people being communists, people that they know, right? So this movie could be used as an analogy for like snooping in on people and assuming that they're communists and that your neighbors are communists and that, the people that you know are communists. So, and finding them and apprehending them is great. So that kind of thing like can totally be seen in this film, where he's just like snooping and he assumes the worst out of people, the same way people were trying to weed the communists out of the government because people believed they were infiltrating. There's a whole thing. I think that this movie was definitely made to entertain first and foremost. Like, I think it was just an entertaining film, but it also had like some commentary about being nosy and about like living your own life, because like one of the things that Stella talks about is how people need to stop like staring out the window and go out and live, in the real life and look in the window for a change. So it's like it talks about how people need to stop living through others and stop living through maybe media. I know that at the time that it was the 50s, so it's not like social media, but like movies and TV shows and other people in general, and get out there and do their own thing, because that's kind of the thing. But in terms of historical context, like, you can know that this is basically about communism and how people are nosy and like wanted to know other people's business when honestly it wasn't any of their business, and that we shouldn't have been like snooping around talking about how people might be communists because we were snooping. Like, that's not cool. I think that there's a lot of symbolism in this film. The windows were a really big one. Like, I think there's a saying that like, eyes are the windows to the soul. Like, there's like, you get a window into my life. Like, there's like a bunch of symbols about how the windows were like a view into people's lives, a view into people's like future too, because a lot of times these windows were symbolic for how Lisa and Jeff's future might be. Like, Miss Torso was like a lonely woman, which would have been a fate for Lisa, or like same with Miss Lonely Heart. But Miss Torso specifically like was always like fake around other people and pretend romantic with people just to like get stuff, and that also could have happened to Lisa. Jeff totally could have been like the composer, where he was just pursuing his music and he was all alone, and it was just kind of like a failing thing. Um, he could have been like, they both could have been like the newlyweds, where they were newlyweds and they were happy, and then they got, very bitter very quickly. Um, they could have been like the married couple who like had their dog, and like that was a normal way that they could live. They could also have been like the Thorwalds, and like Jeff could have snapped and killed Lisa. Like these are all possibilities of their future, because I mean, the Thorwalds is least likely, but still he talked about Lisa being naggy or whatever, and that he was annoyed with her. So like, yeah, these windows symbolized windows into the future, but also windows into people's souls, because like you see a lot of people's personal stuff when they have their windows open all the time. You got a really good picture of maybe who they were and what their lives were like. So yeah, windows are like a really interesting theme, and I really like that a lot of this film was told through windows. Like, I think that's such an interesting concept. Um, I know we're not on cinematography, but man, Hitchcock has some banger cinematography, honestly. I think that there's also a lot, maybe not, maybe it's not symbolic, but I think that there's also a lot to be said about how women's roles in this movie were played out, because maybe in a lot of other Hitchcock films, he really doesn't like let women take lead, but in this film, like, a lot of the times Jeff couldn't do anything because he was in a wheelchair, so Lisa and Stella had to do stuff for him. They had to go out and stuff, and like he would call other dudes too, but like the women in this film got like a much bigger part of it, and like Stella Stella had a lot of really interesting commentary, and then Lisa had a lot of adventurous like spirit about her. So I think that there was um, some really good portrayal of women in this film, even though I know that we literally discussed like Hitchcock being a misogynist, and that honestly might be true. But it doesn't show really in this film. In this film, it doesn't really show. Um, in terms of characters and like which ones were like my favorites, and how much I like them, I think that I liked Stella or Lisa the most. Jeff was definitely not my favorite. He was fine, honestly, he was normal. I just thought Stella and Lisa were cooler. Um, probably actually, probably actually Lisa, because she had a really interesting story. Like I liked how complex she was, because she wasn't just like a socialite like they had made her out to seem. She she had like a little bit of a double life, because she was really social, and she was really like proper with her cute little clothes that like were super expensive, um, and her fun dinner parties, and she was always busy. But like at the same time, she loved Jeff, and she loved that normal life, and she wanted to be involved with his life. And I think that that's really interesting, and that she was so brave a lot of the times, because she broke into Thorwald's house. Like, that's really brave of her. I think that a lot of women in Hitchcock films don't really do that, but it was nice to see Lisa for a change just like do that. And like Stella with her comedic relief was really nice. She definitely was more of a stereotypical character in terms of like comic relief, but she had some really good commentary. Again, I mentioned that, and I think that's pretty neat. Uh, I think that the actors did a really, really good job in this film, honestly, because it was a thriller, so it was supposed to be like really intense and stuff, and it was. It was a good, intense film with like some really good acting to fall behind it. You could feel the fear in Jeff when he was confronted by Mr. Thorwald. You could see like the the rising tension going on between everybody in this film. Um, it was really, really good. I thought that they really played out their characters. I thought that like the actress for Lisa made her very interesting and complex, and like Stella's acting was really wonderful, because she was just serious enough that she could deliver like some really raw dialogue, but then also like just silly enough that she could make like fun jokes and make poke fun of everything all the time. Well, silly is the right word, comedic enough, I guess. So that's a really hard balance to do with a character, and I think that the actors handled it, or the actress handled that really well. Um, I think for Jeff too, like it's hard to play a character that can't move around as much. Um, and Jeff didn't, like, he was in a wheelchair the entire time. So it's like that was hard to do, and I can't imagine that. And it was really really interesting to see, like, you could tell on his expression, like, as he started to question what was going on and what was going on in those windows and what was going on with Mr. Thorwald, and then as it moved on, it was really more desperate. Like, the entire tone of the movie had shifted, and like a lot of it had to do with the music and the timing and the stuff, but it also had to do with a lot of it had to do with the acting and how people were really playing out those scenes of like being really stressed and terrified about what was going to happen next. As far as direction goes, Alfred Hitchcock is a very good director. I think I've said that before. He directed Rope. I really liked Rope, and I really like this film, and I think that it has the same level of like really good cinematography. But in terms of direction, I thought that the story was really straightforward. I thought that it was really easy to follow. I didn't have any like hard time figuring stuff out, even though you had to. And I think that that's really hard because even though you had to, like, everything was a little bit implied because obviously a lot of the people in the rear mirror, like, that you could see, they weren't having a lot of like dialogue with Jeff or anything. There were a lot of inferences you had to make based on just looking at what was going on, and still, even with that, you were able to understand the story and you were able to understand the gist of everybody's character and their lives, and like that's really hard to do. So it was really like it was really straightforward. It made something complex easy to follow. Um, there was a ton of suspense. It's so much suspense because you're obviously waiting for the reveal, and a lot of the times you would even wonder if there was a murder, right? Because like there's so much that's done to try and disprove the murder that like you start to question yourself, you start to question your sanity, and that you're like, well, wait a minute, am I the one who's wrong? And I think that that's how you know you've got some really good like tension and suspense and like mystery going on. I love that. Um, the pacing of this film also really helped with the mystery and the suspense of it all because I think it was done really well. I don't think that there was anything super boring about the movie, even though maybe it might feel a little bit slower just because you're watching, you know what I mean? Like, instead of there being a lot of action, you're watching the action from like the perspective of someone who's just sitting in a chair, you know what I mean? Like, there's no one in the action uh, from the main cast, from the main three people that are like speaking all the time and like get more characterization. So that's really interesting how that happened. There was a lot of tension between the characters and also um, the the Thorwalds and that kind of thing. Like there was a lot of tension going around, especially like the couple with the dog. Like, I think she had a moment where she was really upset. It's just the tension worked really well for this film. Obviously, it really created some suspenseful and tense scenes with, especially at the end, like it all culminated at the end with Thorwald going into the apartment. I think that that was really, really, really cool how he did that. And the conflict for this film was very good because obviously there's a lot of suspense and tension regarding the mystery and regarding kind of how events unfolded, but the actual conflict against Mr. Thorwald, and also like Jeff against himself, honestly, because there was a lot of self conflict going around with him in regards to Lisa because he wanted to not marry her at the beginning of the movie because he thought that they were different, they were too different, and that she was too good for him. But and he's kind of having that conflict with himself of not knowing what to do with her because he wants to let her go, but he also wants to have her, and he doesn't really know how to let her in or anything. So there's a lot of conflict going on inside of Jeff that he works with in this movie, and it's really interesting. And I think that it's like that self conflict, because I think that that's like one of the rawest forms of conflict, and it's good. Um, I like it a lot. So that was really good. There was an actual conflict, obviously, between like the Thorwalds and like their mystery. There was an actual confrontation at the end. So I think I think overall direction was really, really good. I think that Alfred really knows what he's doing. The score was fantastic for this film. Honestly, like, it was really great. I I loved it. I thought that it supported the mood. I thought that it made everything much more mysterious. Also, just the sound in general was like really nice. It really gave a good ambiance to the whole thing. Um, like the music really ramped up when there was something really suspicious happening. Like you could just tell when stuff was going to go down just based on like how the music was building and everything. Like it was very, very good at building that atmosphere and making the suspense and tension really work for the film. And even though like obviously Jeff is sitting down, there was a lot of tension, and a lot of that came from the music, a lot of it came from the acting, a lot of it came from the way that the things were shot. It was all a culmination of really good things that made a really good movie. Um, so yeah, like the music was really great. It wasn't too distracting or anything. It was really nice. And it worked really well with the theme, obviously. It was a mystery. Like, there was a bunch of suspense in the music and a lot of build-up and a lot of dramatic flares of it that it was just really, really fitting, of course. Um, in terms of cinematography, I think that's one of the biggest things that this film has going for it is the cinematography. Of course, Alfred Hitchcock, like the guy to go to for cinematography. He's got some absolutely fantastic cinematography, and we continue to see that throughout his like other films that we've been watching. With Rope, obviously, I thought it was fantastic, and with Rear Window, I also think it was fantastic. I think that he didn't outdo himself, I would say. I think that Rope definitely still takes the cake on that one. But Rear Window has some incredible shots. It has some incredible symbolism in the cinematography. I just really, really liked the way that he used the camera in order to portray the story. And, like, he used it in so many very clear ways, like, with the windows. And, like, I'll talk about it a little bit in a second, but, like, the sets, the way that they made the entire, like, thing was really interesting, and how much commitment he made to how the shot looked. Aside from the all the windows, obviously all the window shots that they make in this film, I particularly liked when they would do the POV scenes where they would sweep across like the scene as if you were the character, and you could kind of like tell, and the camera would zoom on kind of like what was important, and I think that was really interesting. I also liked how they would zoom on something important. When they would just zoom in on something in general, like when they would zoom in on the piece of paper that Jeff was writing on to send to Thorwald, like that was really nice. Instead of just like having the scene be that like middle shot, like medium shot with like him writing, it would like zoom to an extreme close up of the paper. I think that was really I think that was really neat and really helpful. So yeah, like the action was shot coherently. There wasn't a ton of like mobile action, but the action that was like mobile, it was shot well. The movement of the camera I thought was super smooth, especially like in those panning shots that I was talking about with the POV. The actors and settings were framed exceptionally well. I thought that the framing was really important. Obviously, like the windows and the way that people moved through them and how it showed only like bits and pieces of their lives. Like the framing of that was really, 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 really good. But moving on to production design, talking about those windows and that framing, I loved this set. The set that this was made on is so neat. I always thought it was so interesting because the set is like it's one big set. There's no real city or anything. It's supposed to be New York, and they were able to do it all in one set, like in that place, and it's amazing, honestly, what they were able to do with it. I heard that they had to like they built it on the wrong level, so they just like tore out and made a basement so that it could all fit together really nicely. Like it was really interesting and impressive how far they were willing to go for the sets for this film, and I think it really paid off. The actual decor and the sets themselves were very good. I thought that they felt really lived in, especially Jeff's apartment. I think that it said a lot about him, the way that it was organized, or not organized, I should say. and it felt really lived in, and it felt very realistic to his characters, and all of the windows and all of the sets and all the rooms there, regarding the windows, were all very thematic. Like, they all had like aspects of their characters and of their stereotypes and stuff, and I think that is really interesting. I liked the way that the production design was really thought out. I thought that it was really, really good. But yeah, like the sets and stuff felt really believable and in character and in theme with the plot, and they really helped like build the atmosphere of this film and build up the characters and everything. I thought it was really good. And in terms of editing, everything seemed very smooth. I didn't notice any really choppy movements or anything. There was like a good flow to the film. I didn't have there weren't any like drag down scenes or whatever. I didn't notice any specific effects. I don't think that was really the intention, was to like show off showy effects. It was just sort of it was more based on how the movement of the camera and the placement of the camera. The editing wasn't entirely the focus, and that's totally fine. It was completely normal. The transitions were normal. They were good. I think that I definitely saw some in there. I can't name any specific ones, but I think I saw some in there that were like very smooth and like definitely not like rope in how they were, but they were kind of like rope-esque in that they maybe like faded to black or something. So that was good. With regards to the pace, I already talked about it a little bit, but the movie flowed well. Like, it was really, really good. It had a good pacing. I thought that the pacing allowed for the suspense and the tension to build up, the mystery to kind of unravel before our eyes. I thought that the pacing really set the tone for the mystery and how fast it would be. It wasn't fast. It was a normal, suspenseful pace. I don't think it was like. I think if anything, it was too slow. But I think it was it was pretty good for me. Like, I think that maybe it could have been a little faster, but I also I don't think that would have made much impact. So I don't think that making it any faster just for like people with me who like can't pay attention, like that would take away from the film. It was organized really well. Again, I mentioned that a bit. It was really straightforward, and there wasn't anything that really dragged anything down. Finally, we have dialogue, and I think that with dialogue, there was a lot of really good conversations. I thought that there were some really introspective things that people said. Again, I'm harkening back to Stella talking about how people should spend time living outside and looking in the houses versus living in their houses and looking outside. I think that that's really introspective, and it says a lot about the state of America at the time. A lot of the time, the dialogue did bring context to plot developments. Like, there was a lot of things that they couldn't really do in terms of action, so they had to use a lot of dialogue and a lot of explaining and a lot of back and forth to sort of get that dialogue to develop properly, get that plot to develop properly. Sorry. So yeah, that dialogue was super, super important to how the plot played out and how the audience understood the plot. And I think that the dialogue also did a really good job at matching the mystery. There was always discussions about what was really going on and kind of people's intentions, and a lot of the times the maybe Lisa and Stella's perspective was more of the audience, where they don't know the mystery and they're not crafting this and they're hearing it for the first time. And I think that creates an interesting dialogue between the characters, because Jeff kind of serves as like the creator of this thing, even though he's not. And then Lisa and Stella are more of the listeners. So like you get that balance of like him trying to explain what's going on and them sort of giving the same sort of reactions that the audience would give. I think that it really gives a good back and forth, and it definitely matches like the mystery tone of trying to figure out what's going on, obviously. So that's it for Rear Window as an analysis. I honestly really, really like this film. I thought that it was good. I thought that it was done really well. I think it was a really well made movie, as well as just an enjoyable film. I don't know if it has a lot of rewatchability in terms of the mystery, because that first sit through when you don't really know whether or not the Thorwald actually did like have a situation going on, would really kind of take away from rewatching it. But at the same time, I bet a ton of people rewatch it just to admire the pretty cinematography and like the costumes and the everything. I think that was really, really worth rewatching. I don't think I will, but it was a good film. I liked it. I like Hitchcock and I like his films. I don't know about his actual practices and how he treats his workers, but the movies themselves, regardless of anything else, are good. And I'm really liking his movies so far. So, yeah. See you all probably next week. I believe we're doing Psycho next, and that's going to be a fun time. I think I've heard a lot about the movie. I've never seen it. So, yeah, look forward to that next week. Thank you so much. Have a good one.